Today's episode actually brought me to tears a couple of times, and I was holding them back. The stories that Dr. Immanuel Joseph shares with us are beautiful and compassionate and makes sense because not only is he a brilliant scientist, teacher, entrepreneur, but he is a compassion coach. And it really touched me today.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty cool guy. His voice is puts me in like what's that word when you're like spellbound, like hypnotized. When he
Yeah.
speaks, I just want to go like, "Whoa, this guy's talking like hypnotized."
It's pretty soothing. So,
Yeah.
without further ado, let's bring him on because this episode really pulls at the heartstrings.
And today, I think if you're a parent, you should be listening because if your child does something wrong, like maybe stealing something, the words of advice that you know I got from his father were definitely something I'm going to take for life.
Wonderful. Let's get to it. Hi, and welcome to Indian Explorers. In this podcast, we talk about Indian success stories. I am Sabrina, and together with my co host Amit, we will get to understand the journey of our guests and what drives them. The optimism, patience, idealism, and courage, these are their attributes which we hope to bring to life in our conversations with them. If you enjoy the show, please hit the subscribe button and share it with others. I'm happy to introduce today Dr. Immanuel Joseph. He is a high school biology teacher, a former cancer drug discovery scientist, a passionate proponent of compassionate workplaces, a life coach, public speaker, author of 8 books, and 3 TEDx talks. Today, we will be diving into a topic that challenges our conventional views on strength and heroism. We often celebrate grand gestures and exceptional acts, but today we'll explore how small habitual acts, what our guest calls micro compassion, can make heroes of us all. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Sabrina. It's a pleasure to be here. And Amit, pleasure to be here as well.
Good morning. Where you're at, Dr. Emmanuel, or Emmanuel?
Uh,
What do we call you today,
Im-
sir?
Emmanuel is great.
Yeah.
I'm in a small city called McKinney. I'm saying small, but it's growing exponentially fast. McKinney is a small town outside of Dallas, about 40 minutes out.
Oh,
Finally,
Sabrina's neighbor.
a neighbor. Yes, usually lately, a lot of our guests have come from India, and so it's nice to be in the same time zone and the same state as our guest today.
I want to start at the beginning, Emmanuel. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, why you in Texas? Maybe a little bit about your education, upbringing. Was it in India? Was it in America? Just to get to know you.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. I grew up in India, in Chennai, which is in the southern part of India. I was there for the first 23 years of my life. Did my bachelor's in zoology, master's in molecular biology, and came here to pursue a PhD in biochemistry at the Tulane School of Medicine in New Orleans. And then on to become a postdoctoral fellow at Geron, which is a company in the Bay Area in California. And then became a scientist, worked on cancer drug discovery, then shifted on to a small business, which is basically taking care of seniors at the end of life stages in home care services, and grew that business. And from there, moved on to um, understanding compassion, learning about compassion, and trying to spread that idea out to as many people as I can, including in companies. And then the pandemic, and then during the pandemic, moved here to Texas because my wife's doing a PhD here in the Texas Women's University. It didn't make sense for her to keep going back and forth. And when we moved here, it was a wonderful decision. The first thing that I could get into was into teaching. And I realized how much I love teaching. It's been 4 years now. So I'm continuing to teach. I teach AP biology and I teach AP environmental systems. having fun.
That is so wonderful. Before we started recording, I asked you how it's like teaching teenagers. And you told me that you received about 100 letters of gratitude, love letters from your students last year. That is so wonderful. And from teenagers, that's fantastic.
Is that creepy? Like love letters?
Well, I think I would like to call them love letters, but I'm the one who's feeling absolutely grateful here, because it takes a lot for a student at that age to trust an adult so completely, and you earn that trust. You don't demand that trust from a young person, right? I'm lucky in that sense because the group of students that I'm working with right now are extremely motivated to learn. And I've realized that it's all about shared respect and knowing that, they are there for a purpose and I'm there for a purpose in their lives. And just to respect that and respect them and watch them grow in their own way, it's just an incredible gift.
That
I
must be
think it's a
so
great
rewarding.
I think it's a great
Yeah.
profession. I think teaching is undervalued. Sabrina, I think you would be a phenomenal teacher. I mean,
Um,
I would be awful teacher, awful.
You know, I don't have the patience, and I learned that during COVID when our daughter was home taking virtual classes. I didn't have the patience to teach, maybe because it was my own child, but I have the utmost respect for teachers and everything they do, and I'm a big proponent of paying them more because it is, they're educating our children. And I sit with my child and go through homework, but I think that's good for me.
For me, it's teachers and librarians after that episode with Dr. Varsha.
Yes, yes.
Is it
So,
Dr. Varsha?
okay, you mentioned, it sounds like your students have a lot of compassion, and I wonder if you're teaching them that as well. But let's get into this topic of micro compassion. What is it, and how did you find a passion for it?
To understand micro compassion, I think we first need to discuss compassion as a lens through which we observe the world. The idea of compassion is observing suffering without judgment and feeling for it, emoting to the suffering that we are witnessing, and then asking, what can I do to change that suffering? And suffering is a loaded word, so it can be interpreted in many ways. For me, it is a deviation from harmony. Harmony is joy, and any deviation from harmony manifests as suffering. So and again, you look around, there's so much happening in the world, right? And that we become aware of because of the media. You see wars that's being waged for no reason at all, balance of the nature of our environment being destroyed by people who are very, very short-sighted, who don't see that our role here is to just be guardians and keepers of our place for a very short period of time and pass it on to our next generation. People don't realize that. They're so greedy, they want to take everything. So you're seeing all of this and you're wondering, when will this ever stop? And then you make that circle a little bit closer, and then you see within our own family circles, within our own friend circles, there is so much of anxiety, so much of stress, and for why? And then you go back into your own mind, and then you see, the past that we carry within ourselves and the future that we are so scared of for, even though we have no control over it and refusing to be in this moment. So all of this suffering is real. And we can either ignore it and say that none of this exists, or we can say, yes, I am a part of this journey today. So compassion is just a visual and a lens that you kind of wear, with which you see the world as a place. Yes, there is suffering happening. I acknowledge that suffering. But I also see that there is a way that I can experience it without going through the same suffering myself, without being caught in it myself. And then being able to overcome that through actions. So that's what compassion means, and it's applicable in, as you can imagine, any field of our being. Um, so that sounds like a grand idea, right? But how do you practice it in a very practical way. So to me, that's where this idea of micro compassion comes in. If I say I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow, I just want to get up tomorrow morning and run a marathon, I won't be able to do that because my body and my mind is not trained to do that, right? So what I would probably do is doing little things. I'd probably start with push-ups. I'll probably start with sit-ups and do that over a period of time until my neuronal connections are rewired. There's a law called the Hebb's law. It says neurons that fire together wire together. So if you keep doing something over a period of time, your brain becomes that uses it, that becomes a default pathway for your brain. Right? Otherwise, imagine a threat being thrown at you, or what you perceive as a threat being thrown at you. You immediately go in for the limbic response, which is the fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we are built, right? That's a reptilian response, as we
Right.
say. But then beyond that is what makes us human is our prefrontal cortex, that we can look beyond the fear and give it a moment of consideration and say, maybe this is not as bad as it seems. Maybe there is a different way of responding to it that creates a win-win. So that's where the idea of micro compassion comes in. Consistently deliberate acts, small acts
Small app.
that kind of change, that kind of change the wiring in our brain to see the world as a place where we can handle the suffering with a certain element of grace, that we can do it so without judgment, and we can make a difference. I can think of a quick small incident here that happened recently. I was at Target. There's a long checkout line and a self checkout lane at Target, and there was this young girl who was coming from customer to customer and saying, "Did you have a good experience? I hope you found everything you wanted." The standard statement. I looked at her and said, "No, everything was great. By the way, how are things with you? How's your day?" She said, the standard answer, right? Everything looks great. Uh, And then I don't know what prompted her. She looked at me and said, "No, things are not really great. Everything sucks." I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I just broke up with my boyfriend 2 hours ago. I don't want to be here, but I'm forced to be here." And so we spoke about this for a while, and my turn came. I saw a Kit Kat bar, and they usually have try to tempt people who are checking out by keeping all these candies there.
Impulsive.
So I'm yeah. So I'm not oblivious to that. So I bought this big candy bar, and then I thought about her. I called her and I said, "Do you like candy?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." So this is for you. And I mean, it was not really about the candy, but I think it totally made a difference that somebody was there seeing her and listening to her and making sure that she was okay. So that's a micro compassion, right? That's a small act of micro compassion.
Yeah.
It shows up in a way. Yeah, go ahead.
Amitu might like laugh at me right now, but I'm holding back the tears.
No, I'm just, you know what? That's the most American story I've heard in a long time. Like,
But you know
with
what? That's the reason I'm emotional is because it's not anymore. And I feel like, Emmanuel, if I'm at Target and, I always look at the cashier's name tag, and I say, thank you. And I use their name and you see like the smile on their face, like, oh, you addressed me, or how are you doing today? The same thing. And I don't understand why there's not more of that in this, not just country, this world. So, do I think it's actually the opposite. It's
I can tell you.
we're not doing it.
Remember when we had Rajesh Sethi's episode? Rajesh obviously introduced us to Emmanuel here, and Rajesh told us a story that he wanted to go to another country because the income was more, but his parents said you'll only leave if you get married. And for
Mhm.
me, that was the most brown story I've ever heard. This, for me, an American person that you don't know at Target, the most American store possible, actually answering back and saying, actually, things are not well. Like in other places in the world, I guess the training does not allow them to have that type of conversation with their customer. So my point is that that doesn't happen anywhere else in America. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's great that the individual, even though they were working, felt Emmanuel's warmth to be able to share such a story. Because I tell you what, if I was in that Target line and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" They would look at me and say, fine, thanks. If they reply to me, I think Emmanuel elicits that type of
It was its
response.
passion. Mhm.
His soft tone, his demeanor, his eye contact. I think he's learned how to be a compassionate person. And that's what I want to, absorb today and listen. Sorry, Dr. Emmanuel, please carry on.
Oh, thank you. No, you're very generous and kind. But I think, it took a lot of courage from that girl
Mhm.
to open up to a stranger and say, it's okay for me to be vulnerable with this person, whoever it was, right? So I really appreciate that people are willing to come forward with their vulnerability. But we of course need to set the roadmap for them to say that it's okay to be vulnerable. And so yeah, it's just these little things that, even talking to our spouses, talking to our children, creating that little space in our conversation between, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. The story of him. He was a neuropsychologist who spent 3 years or so in the Auschwitz camp and other camps, and he observed a lot of suffering in the camps. And he wrote this book almost as a catharsis after his captivity, which became one of the biggest sellers of the 20th century. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he noticed that in this very dire circumstance of the Holocaust setting, there were people who were, of course, dog eat dog world kind of situation. And there were people who were, in the middle of all of this, willing to give their last piece of bread for somebody else and knowing that they're going to starve and die. And And he said that it all comes down to choice. It all comes down to that moment by moment choice, right? And he wrote this. He said, between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. In that space lies our choice, and in that choice lies our freedom. So I think it comes to creating those spaces between us and our children in our conversations, between us and our spouses in our conversations, our friends, our work colleagues, if we are able to pause and say that they do deserve a little bit of love, a little bit of understanding without judgment. And maybe I'm the person who is called to make a little bit of difference in their suffering today, in that moment. Things probably can be different.
Can I ask you something? Like, if you were there talking to Adolf Hitler, or let's bring it to today's day and age, if you were there, part of the UN, and you were asked to go and speak to, Netanyahu about, what Israel is doing in Palestinian right now, like, how would you even address like such an issue? Because I understand micro compassion and talking to a girl in Target, but when you're talking about what's happening with the wars that you mentioned and the 30,000 dead people already in that area, how would you even go about having that conversation? And I'm sorry to throw it at you, but since you brought up Hitler, I just thought about it.
No, that's a powerful question, and it's a very essential question. And thanks for bringing it up. So this perception that compassion is this person meditating on a mountaintop away from everybody else and finding inner peace in the middle of, under the moonlight. That's kind of not a reality for all of us, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
we're not
we
all
are. If
monks.
I'm a child,
We're not all
yeah,
monks.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, that's true. We are not all monks. We are probably monks in family life, but not in that typical setting.
not even.
So yeah, but that's a question. But I have come to realize that compassion is being able to do the right thing, and the right thing is sometimes the long term right at the cost of increasing short term suffering. Um, somebody when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was visiting Australia, one of the reporters asked him, you speak about compassion all the time, but what if a mosquito comes and bites you? And he said, well, sometimes how he's funny and his language is kind of interesting how he speaks about when he tries to communicate in English. We were saying, oh, it depends on the day, but if a mosquito comes, first time go shoo shoo shoo, second time I go, and then if I'm not feeling good, then I go, and that's okay. So so sometimes you need to deal with the creator of suffering in a way that's going to prevent uh, further suffering. I mean, you're always seeing the greater good, right? Let me bring that to a more practical example that we would encounter in an everyday setting. Let's say you're a boss and you have an employee who's not doing really well, and you know that this person is actually bringing your workplace down, but of course they need the job, they need the money, and so on. Um, how do you deal with that, right? Because your one part of your compassion says that person has three mouths to feed, and I don't want to be the person who wants to increase the suffering. But then you also know that you have 300 other employees who are dependent on your company's success, and this person can bring your company down. So if it is possible to have that conversation early on to say, hey, do you think we can change things better? These are the challenges, and to be open about it, right? Not to sugarcoat it and say this is the actual setting. Do you think we can make a difference together? And if the person says no, I cannot, and or they, in their actions they cannot. At some point, it's okay to let them go with all the grace that is due, but at the same time, firm enough to say that they're going to be a better fit in a different setting. So if I were to talk with Netanyahu, and it's not going to be an easy conversation.
Yeah.
No, obviously, because for him, he's obviously justifying the October 7th, incident. So for him, he's doing the right thing for the long term for his people, right?
Uh, yeah, but again, you're thinking about one group of people. We're not thinking about the planet. I mean, we think of war as 30,000 people dead, or 500,000 people dead. But beyond that 500,000 people dead are 5 million who are scarred for life as humans. And an environment, animals and plants and landscapes that are caught in the crossfire for no fault of their own. And again, our biggest role is not to be custodians of our history, but to be custodians of our planet, just to witness it, experience it, and pass it on to the next generation. And so, if this man's justification is to say, my people and my history and my 600,000 people, I would invite him to look beyond that and say, our planet, our universe, and where are you? You're a blip in that consciousness. You're a
Sure.
small, fleeting thing. Don't destroy life.
Mhm.
Got it.
What
The Elon
what
Musk argument.
inspired you to start studying this concept of compassion and micro compassion?
So I was working with seniors, right? And one of the cardinal mistakes of running an in-home care agency is you don't get attached to people.
Yeah.
And geriatricians know this, doctors know this, people who are caregivers know this, but I didn't. So I just jumped into the space without understanding the implications, the emotional implications of doing that. And I think it kind of got to me, just kind of observing people go through the stages of Alzheimer's, forgetting everything that was their identity, and then, die, the long goodbye, and witnessing death. And it was hard for me. And I think in some ways I became depressed, clinically depressed. I didn't realize it. And, and of course, then I went and sought medical help. And during that time, I went to Stanford. Stanford was very close to my home at that point, so they offering a program at Stanford called compassion cultivation training. That was my first exposure to compassion as a study subject. And one of the things that we focused on was this metta meditation, loving kindness meditation. So over and over, we would practice loving kindness. And the idea of metta is this idea that we have this extraordinary ability to give love and friendliness to ourselves and the world around us, even to the people who hurt us. And that requires a certain, again, level of vulnerability there to open up to the universe and its healing powers. And as I did that over a period of time, I realized that I was truly healing inside out. Um, and that stuck with me, that realization that when you remove all those judgments, when you're becoming a source of healing, all that remains, if you remove suffering, is joy.
Mhm.
And you experience joy, you want to share it with other people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Wow.
that's how it happened.
I want to know, like, the role of your parents. Like, were your parents strict with you? Were they like loving parents? Were they typical Indian parents where they only cared about your grades? Can you walk us through that?
It was a mix of everything. But since you're asking about my childhood, it's an interesting story I would like to share. When I was about 5 years old, um, I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. We were coming back from lunch, my father and I. And in those days in India, in Chennai, we used to have these wooden carts with fruits on them on the roadsides. And I don't know why, but I just didn't want to ask my dad for grapes. They piled grapes on that. And I just reached out thinking that nobody was noticing. I grabbed some grapes and the shopkeeper saw that and he started yelling at me. My father was immediately upset. He said he came to my defense and said, "My son won't do this." And I saw what was happening. I took the grapes and popped it in my mouth and standing there, not able to swallow those grapes. And and then my father saw me, and then he turned to the shopkeeper and said, "I'm so sorry." And then he bought some grapes from this guy, and everything was great. And then he turned to me, and I was expecting to be whacked. And again, believe me, those were the days when it was okay to get
Whacked.
physically beaten up.
Yeah,
Yeah, whacked.
Yeah.
In school, at home, everywhere, right? It
school with
was
the
common.
ruler.
It was
School with the
with
ruler.
a ruler.
At home with the sandal.
Yeah. So I was expecting that it was going to be an interesting episode after I reached home. But all my father did was turn to me and say, if you want anything, just ask me. And that's that. That's all he did. And again, that was when I was 5. I'm 47 now. My father died about 6 months after that experience, after that incident. And it's still one of the strongest memories I have of my father. And 42 years later, that's still one of my strongest memories of my father. And so I'm thinking that little incident um, was an act of micro compassion. He could have immediately reacted, that knee jerk response. But again, with Viktor Frankl saying, right, the stimulus and the response, he took that pause and he made a choice. And that became an example for me in my life. And I go about doing my own things today, and I feel compelled to judge people. I stop and think, I've been given that grace. Maybe I can pass it on.
Thanks for sharing that. I think if I see any of my sons steal, I would not handle it as well as your father did, and that's a learning for me.
Mhm.
And I think that vendor selling grapes is probably still there in Chennai in that same street. From last time I went to India, they're still doing that.
That particular vendor is probably a centenarian at this point, but if he is,
Or his
good for
son,
him.
or his child. His child's probably taken over.
Yeah, possibly.
Possibly. Sabrina, where do we go from here?
You have given training at big companies like Amazon, Salesforce, dealing with compassion. Share a little bit about how those training courses go and what changes you observed.
Well, thank you for asking that. I mean, this goes back to my transition from being an in-home care business person to trying to teach compassion ideas and skills, or at least inspire people to think more compassionately. And workplaces seem to be an ideal choice because there is so much of challenges happening in workplaces that goes unnoticed or swept under the rug. Um, I mean, you can imagine people with so many different priorities and preferences coming together in one goal, working in that small niche area. It's bound to be a setting for suffering. So, what I realized was when I was trying to study this idea that if you do want to bring a real change in organizations, that change must happen inside out. You cannot force an organization to say, from going forward, you cannot force 2,000 people in an organization to say, going forward, we're all going to be compassionate to each other. That's not going to happen. You can set the tone, of course, and you can show that you value it and prioritize it as an organization, as a head of an organization. But the real change in day to day experiences must happen from within. So what I looked at was what are the key things that must shift within a person so that he becomes or she becomes a beacon of compassion within that setting and therefore inspire others, because compassion is like a stone thrown into a pond, right? It ripples out, and then others are inspired and they practice acts of compassion, and then that ripples out, and that's how change happens. So the 9 things that I identified as being critical were questions that you can ask yourself, and again this goes beyond the setting of a workplace, and becoming a lens through with which you experience the world. The first is the idea of self-compassion, because you cannot give what you do not have. And then within an organization, you place people first. I mean, you have company goals and everything, but people first thinking goes a long way. And the idea of abundance versus scarcity, mindfulness, and seeing beyond our cultural differences, beyond our biases, to recognize that we are all one, um, and then to be vulnerable and to communicate compassion, to think big picture, which is to basically look at life through a sense of perspective and purpose, and finally gratitude, right? Um, being able to notice that the many things that we have don't necessarily be the things that we need to have at this point. So these things can kind of shift the dialogue internally and shift the dialogue with people around us. So that's the idea that I was trying to share. We did these things called compassion hackathons, where we would go in the morning and present this framework, and then I would present scenarios in the afternoon, and then we would have people share their ideas around what they feel for that particular, what would be solutions for that particular situation, and then they would come out and they'd share, and people would adopt something as a resolution for them. So it's fun. It's really fun doing these kinds of
I
things.
bet.
I want to talk about how do you measure compassion, because is there a direct correlation or studies done that companies that do these type of compassionate micro courses or workshops have a better bottom line or top line? Or how do we, like, companies are all about KPIs, right? So numbers, numbers, numbers. Is there anything you can share with us about numbers and compassion?
I mean, there are lots of studies. I don't remember numbers off my head, but yes, there have been studies done to show the impact of compassion training and empathy. And sometimes they use empathy training as a alternate version of compassion training, but the idea is kind of the same. Um, but I can't remember numbers. But yes, there is a lot of research showing that it does make a huge difference in retention, in trust, in the ability to attract new talent, in productivity, in engagement, and overall perception, self-perceived or self-reported notions of happiness.
Okay.
So all of these things are shifting because of compassionate
Yeah.
behaviors.
I'm it sounds like such a simple concept, but we don't think about it enough, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Ugh. I'm gonna shift gears, Amitu, if that's okay, a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. I want to know. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I want to talk about your latest book, The Road to Kedarnath. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, Kedarnath. Yeah.
Tell us about it. There's a beautiful Amazon review. It says, "Thank you for the journey, Immanuel. A beautifully written, transformational, and healing book that touched my heart. A gift of grace during a challenging time. I really connected to the characters and didn't want the book to end." Tell us a little bit about the book
Who
and
wrote
where.
that review? Emmanuel's son? That's a beautiful review. That's
No, I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for that book. As with all books, I always believe that we simply become conduits for something bigger than us. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I have experienced that when the best books, the best lines are written when you become a conduit for knowledge or wisdom or whatever is that's out there. And the road to Kedarnath was sitting in the pipeline for a long time before it found its way through me. This is a story about healing, about a man's journey from, um, he is a successful software engineer in the United States, an Indian guy, and he does an unspeakable crime and mistake in his life, and goes back and is not able to forgive himself, becomes a mendicant in the streets of India. You know, people we see sometimes as the mentally ill and not worthy of our attention. He's one of those guys.
Sorry, what is the crime?
And
He kills who?
do you want our readers to read the story?
Yes, you have
No,
to
no,
wait.
no. I want to explain a little bit because I think it's
Yeah,
important. Because
yeah, no. So it's true. He inadvertently causes the death of his wife and his unborn child, and so during that, and then he's at the point where he decides that he needs to end it all. He goes to Kedarnath, and near Kedarnath there is a place where it's called Bhairav Jump. It's believed that if you jump from there, you can escape the cycle of rebirth. And there, just about he's about to find this place, he meets a man, a tea seller, and the tea seller, his name is Krishna, and our hero's name is Arjuna. So Arjuna and Krishna spend a winter in the mountains in Kedarnath, near Kedarnath, and Krishna imparts his wisdom of living and healing and finding inner peace and finding joy in the middle of all the chaos. And so the book is about what happens to Arjuna when he learns through Krishna about life, and what does he do with his life after that. So there's a lot of going back and forth about his own life experiences with all kinds of settings that he encounters in the streets of India, and how he comes to terms with his own life and his own guilt.
we'll put the
So
link of the book, the Amazon link, in our show notes.
absolutely. And the best part is that book is now free for anybody who wants to listen to it in audio form. And I'll tell you a little bit about the audio recording of this, right? I found the most amazing guy in South Africa to record it. He's a nuclear physicist. And I was trying to find somebody who would be the perfect voice for this book. And so I reached out to him. It was an accidental reach out, and he agreed. He read the book, he loved it, and he agreed to be a part of it. And I could not have asked for a better rendition of this book. It was just beautiful. It was a universe coming together. And then there is this incredible sound engineer in India, Amudan. He provided the background music that goes with it. So this is an experience, right? And I decided, an idea like this, a thought like this, a healing like this should not be constrained. So I made it public. It's there in my channel, YouTube channel. I'll share that link with you.
Please, we'll share it as well.
It's a full playlist.
Yeah,
takes about 3 hours of listening, but 3.5 hours of listening, but it's fun.
and that led, to the podcast, which is something also related to the tea seller.
Yeah. So I realized that this notes that I was taking to write this book. There's only so much you can add to a book. So there's a lot more information that you want to share and you really don't get to. So I thought, what if Krishna were to continue his conversations with us directly? So the tea seller telling his tales, sharing his stories. So that became a podcast called The Tea Seller's Tales. That's kind of in a pause right now, because what I did was take that Tea Seller's Tales podcast and make it into a YouTube channel, which is what I'm currently focusing on.
Videos.
It's called Guide to Joy.
Okay, we'll put that link as well.
Thank you. So what happens there is that I realize that people do not have the attention span to sit for, a 20-minute discourse on the Upanishad or on Bhagavad Gita or Bible or Quran. But if you break it down into 2-3 minutes of wisdom, compact wisdom, with a quick story to accompany it, people are willing to listen and take something from it. So that's what Guide to Joy is about. It's about bringing wisdom in really compact 3-minute spaces.
Tell us about it. Our podcasts are 1 hour long, but we feel like our guests, to understand their story and their journey, we feel like the long story is more added value in the long term.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's everything that the vagaries of our mind takes us to, right? I wake up in the morning with a burning question: um, why am I not feeling peace today? And that particular day, the solution, the answer might show up as maybe because I overpromised today, and I'm trying to meet a deadline. So what if I underpromise and overdeliver? You pot, right? um, or the another day, and most of these things happen, by the way, when I'm taking a bath. So the quiet time and the water hits you, and it's like, oh no, I need to go out and write this down. So so that's how a lot of these ideas come. Or another day it could be that, what am I feeding my mind? I want peace, but am I really feeding it peace? The mind is like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. But am I really feeding it garbage and expecting peace to come out of it? If I see the news of all the chaos happening in the world and not even expose myself to the good things out there, how am I ever going to find hope in the day's events? What am I digging into, right? So maybe instead of going gigo, garbage in, garbage out, maybe I should go people, right? And just to say, I don't know, I had a nice thing that came up the other day for people. Um, but good things in and good things out, right? So that's probably how peace and peace out. That's what I was trying to come to, peace and peace out. So yeah, that's it's a lot of different ideas and perspectives that keep coming up, and I share.
People. I'm going to name the episode People.
People,
People.
peace and peace out.
I
Yeah.
like that.
You inspire people through these courses. You researched, cancer drugs. That's inspirational. You're a AP biology teacher, inspiring young minds. Who inspires you?
Who does not inspire me? I think it's probably,
Yeah.
but honestly, I think it's, as long as we are open to it, everybody becomes an inspiration, right? Sometimes my best inspiration comes from my puppy, Charles. How he is able to kind of completely surrender to the universe. In that moment, he doesn't think about the food in the evening or the walk that he needs to go. He's not anxious about it. He's just sitting there, completely relaxed and surrendering, right? And sometimes in that way, he becomes my teacher in that moment. My wife is my teacher a lot because I interact with her so much. My kids are my teachers, the students I teach. But there are some people who kind of stand out in the long run. There is this amazing, amazing, amazing man in the Bay Area. His name is Nipun Mehta. I kind of think of him as a living Gandhi. He's the founder of an organization called Service Space. And he's one of those people who stands out because of authenticity, right? How he truly lives the moment. He lives the philosophy of giving and being, um, completely unbound to the greed and challenges of everything else because he's so giving, right? Um, People like that, and another amazing gentleman I spoke to, his name is Narayanan Krishnan. He founded an organization called Akshara. Yeah, is it that? Akshaya Patra, Akshaya, and he was one of the CNN heroes of 2010. He, found a mentally ill person on the street side eating his own shit, and then he decided to leave his job as a star chef and dedicate his life for that. Yeah. So I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I
Hook
don't know
us,
when I would stop.
hook us up to these two guys. We'd love to talk to them. And what does success mean to you, Dr. Emmanuel? What's your definition of success?
A graceful life.
A graceful life.
Nice, short and sweet. The shortest, simplest answer we've ever received. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that the life you feel you're living now?
I think I've been blessed to experience grace and live grace uh, much more than, and I can, there's always ways I can look back at my life and see where I am right now. I'm in a much more graceful spot than I have ever been in my life.
Okay.
And my hope is that at the end of the day, that's where I am, even better.
Yeah. I do have to ask, you have a very soft, loving voice, right? And it exudes compassion. Have you always had that voice?
Or is it practiced?
Or do you feel as you've practiced compassion, your tone has changed?
I think in a way, this has been me. I mean, without any facade. I think this has always been me. I've not been a very aggressive person in any form at any time, and I think it's always been a certain sense of calmness that was gifted again, probably because of the influence of my parents, of the community that I lived in, and so on. Uh, so I think that's where it comes from.
It's pretty
Sabrina,
innate.
are you saying I don't sound like
No,
Emmanuel?
no. It is not innate for you, but it can be learned.
It can be learned. I don't know. I don't think this level. Okay, Emmanuel, we're gonna jump into the rapid fire round where we ask some questions, and if you can just keep your answers brief. Sabrina, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. What is your favorite book of all time?
Um, a favorite author because he has written every book is great. Ruskin Bond.
Okay. Write that down.
Okay.
What's one of the
Okay.
books he's written? I don't know if I've.
The Room on the Roof.
The Room on the
Um,
Okay.
and he has written all these short story collections. That sits with me in my next to my bed. Best of Ruskin Bond.
Okay.
Time Stops at Shamli, The Night Rowing to Dioli, all of those, right? It's brilliant.
Wonderful.
What's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Um, I've done crazy things. When I was 23, I went on a quest to find a glowing tree and a glowing grass,
Glowing tree.
a glowing tree and glowing grass, because I read about it in old Tamil literature, and I wanted to see if it was true. Went into the mountains, did some crazy things, found the tree and found the grass that glowed in the dark, and but the adventures that came along with that were quite interesting.
Where was this? Where did you go to search for this?
You have to go and take the trip, Sabrina. He's not going to tell you.
So this is in a mountain range called Koli Hills in Tamil Nadu, deep south. But it turned out, at least for the tree, it was called foxfire fungus. It was a fungus growing on it called the foxfire fungus, but that's not usually found in this part of India. But somehow that was it. But the grass, white, was glowing. I think it was some kind of a symbiotic relationship with a microorganism. But what it was, I don't know.
Okay. I have to say this is what this podcast is about. We interview really inspiring people, but the answer we received on the last podcast for this question was totally opposite. It's still fun. It was a couple, and they said the most adventurous thing they've done is kiss in a car and get caught by the Indian police. But both amazing and inspiring people. Okay, what is your go-to relaxation activity?
Sleep.
Same.
Mine has become Pilates, Sabrina.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Okay. If you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
I would master mindfulness.
Okay.
I like his answer, Sabrina. The short.
I know. Yes. If you said short, he follows the rules.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world for 1 year, where would it be?
Inside my room, as long as the food. I would. It doesn't matter physically where I am, because I realize that it's how I'm experiencing it, and I've realized I could be in very exotic spots and really not enjoy it, and I could be in my room and feel completely happy, which is where I enjoy doing that. I have in my study room where everything is set up to a T and to my liking. I don't think I'll find that in any Airbnb anywhere in the world.
It's a great
Sure.
answer.
I'm the same age as you. I'm 47 as well. That's not the question. The question is, what would you tell yourself? The younger self, the 23-year-old.
I would say be humble and be brave. Don't be afraid to experience anything, and don't be so particular about listening to other people's opinions of you. You are just unique in your own way. Just go out there, live it, and but be humble and gracious all the time.
That's our motto.
I love it. I love it. And last one, if you could have dinner with any person, who would it be?
Um, It'd probably be His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Okay. Yeah.
Second person to say that. Somebody else said Dalai Lama as well, right? Was it Rajesh
Yes.
Sethi who said that?
I don't remember. It
Yeah.
might have been.
Rajesh was graceful enough to introduce us. How do you know each other? What's your story and connection?
So we met at a talk that Rajesh was giving. This was what, 12, 13 years ago. And, this man is so amazingly kind and graceful and gentle. And I reached out to him and we had conversation and we realized that we had a lot of things in common. And over the years, we built many wonderful experiences together. So, yeah, he's an amazing mentor, friend, and I'm just honored to know him.
I actually feel the same vibe when I talk to him and I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
the giving vibe.
You're so
Us
kind.
non-givers can feel the vibe immediately when we sense it. It was one of your TED talks as well. I literally had a tear down the cheek. It was so emotional. And I don't know, I don't know if you started or ended. I think Sabrina wrote down the words in one of your TED talks. What was it, Sabrina?
May you ever be free from danger and anxiety. May you experience happiness and love in good measure. May you feel the abundance of life.
Am I right? You started or ended one of your TED talks? And I think you started it with that. And then after you started that, the whole audience was like, "Whoa, this is going to be deep." What was the thinking behind that start?
So this is actually a part of metta meditation, right? So the loving kindness meditation we were discussing earlier, and the idea of metta and again, someday if there's an opportunity, I'll share the link to a metta meditation that the masters have done. But it's the idea that everybody deserves love and happiness and connection and peace, and and so we start by basically enunciating those wishes out into the world. You start with yourself and say, may I be free from danger and anxiety, may I be loved, may I be happy, may I be at ease. And you think of somebody else who's a friend, who's somebody who's easy to love, and you just wish them the same. And you think of a stranger and you wish them the same, and then you pass on those kindness to loving kindness to people who you don't know, or people who you hate, or people who are hurting you. And then those words essentially come from metta, the practice.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. What's next for you, Emmanuel? Like, where you headed? Like, I know you're happy in life. I know you're like in a nice place, but do you have any major ambitions in the next decade or so that you hope to strive to?
So right now I am working with this amazing group of people called Made for Joy, and we are trying to explore how we can create joy experiences in virtual reality. And so we've been building content. I think a couple of companies are already using it in form of meditations, in form of guided. Virtual reality is one of those beautiful experiences where the sky is the limit when it comes to blending that immersiveness, right? So yeah, I've been building content in that space, and I'm also exploring how we can create AR experiences along VR, in promoting joy and happiness. A couple of books in the works, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Do you meditate like daily? Or what is your meditation process of philosophy?
Sometimes it is a sitting meditation, and more often than not, I realize that I'm happy to get into this little space inside on the go. That seems more practical for me. Let's say there's a lull between classes, right? And there's a waiting time when I'm teaching, and then I can simply close my eyes and realize I can escape into little heaven inside. William Blake said this, right? He said, "To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, to um, hold eternity in your hand, to hold infinity in your hand and eternity in an hour." So I think that's the gift that all of us are given, right? That we can escape into that little space of heaven inside us. To me, that is mindfulness, that is meditation. And sometimes we get this through sitting practices, sometimes on the go, as long as we want to.
I think we're going to have to leave it with William Blake's famous quote. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I would love to keep in touch with you. And I'm definitely going to follow all the content that you put out there. And we will share all the notes in the show notes. Thanks a lot, Doctor.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amit. And thank you, Sabrina. Pleasure meeting you both.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you. And thank you for sharing all this beautiful knowledge with us. It's going to go with me, stay with me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
This has been an absolutely wonderful episode, and we hope that you learned a lot just like we did. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
And subscribe.